Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome today to the Innova.buzz podcast from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the USA, Nick Jain, who's the CEO of IdeaScale, the world's largest innovation SaaS company, software as a service. Now, you at IdeaScale help large, complex organizations such as Pfizer, the US Postal Service, innovate faster, better, and more systematically. And you're an evangelist for Gen AI. So I'm really excited to delve into that today. Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast. Nick, it's a real privilege to have you as my guest.
It's an honor to be here, Jurgen. Thank you for having me.
Now, as we embark on our conversation today, I'm keen to delve into your fascinating journey. You started off in Wall Street and now you're leading innovation in your own company at IdeaScale. I'm interested in your unique perspectives, the intriguing culture you're building there, technology and leadership that you're using to drive innovation. Before we get on to all of that, what's the impact you aim to make in the world, Nick, and how do you envision your work contributing to that?
Sure. I'll break it into me personally versus IdeaScale. For IdeaScale, the impact we want to make is we want to be the innovation software of the world. We want, if anybody's innovating, we want them using IdeaScale software. That's the mark we want to leave. On a personal level, I like building things. I like building houses. I like building companies. I like creating and building things and scaling them up. And that just gives me a tremendous amount of joy. So when I leave this world, I would like to have built something along the way or many things along the way.
Yeah. And it sounds like IdeaScale is something that you built, obviously, with well, I imagine with a team. And
Yeah, I'm not the
it-
founder of IdeaScale, but I was brought in as a CEO to help scale the business to make this
okay,
business
right.
scale up.
Yeah. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about IdeaScale and the concept of software for innovation.
Sure. So, IdeaScale has been around about 15 years right now. It was founded by two guys, Rob and Viv, and their mission, the original mission was how do we help large government organizations innovate? Because government agencies in the US had realized, hey, we're not very innovative. We're doing some things 200 years old in some cases. Let's get more innovative. And Rob and Viv had this idea that, look, if they're going to become more innovative, then they can't do it alone. They need the right tools to do so. So they founded IdeaScale to really support government innovation. But since then, we've realized that private sector organizations face the same problems, right? Everyone wants to innovate and everyone's kind of going on at it haphazardly and hoping they're going to be creative and innovative. And turns out innovation is not just something that happens in isolation just because of a rabid genius. It happens, it's a process. There's a right way to do so. In the same way that if you go to the gym, yeah, you can lift a couple weights and you'll get lucky and become stronger, but there's actually a right way to exercise and get fitter, faster, stronger. The same is true with innovation. There's a right set of processes and there's a right set of tools. We really focus on the tool side. And what our tool does is it helps you collect ideas from your entire ecosystem of people, figure out which ideas are good and bad through both a social system as well as an analytical system by people voting it up and down. And then eventually the best ideas float to the top in the same way the best dance videos float to the top of your TikTok feed.
Love, love the analogies. The idea of innovation at a large organization has always intrigued me, having sort of worked for many years in the corporate world in large organizations and always been fascinated by innovation. I always had this feeling that people talk about innovation, but it was really the whole culture actually stifled innovation and the behavior and business practices in the organization stifled innovation. And from what I've heard from other people, friends of mine, colleagues, suppliers, and customers at the time, that pretty much was a common experience in large organizations. How do you tackle those aspects, the culture and the business practices that are kind of there um, to shore up existing business, and at the same time they act as barriers for innovation? For innovation.
So, firstly, I agree with you. Larger organizations do struggle with innovation, right? They're not as nimble, they're not as hungry as a small organization. Small organization, they know if they don't get better, they're going to be eaten alive. Large organizations, when you have billions of dollars of revenue or budget, you are less hungry, less motivated. There's a lot of cultural and impediments to succeeding. Um, but let's back up for a second. There's two types of organizations. Those are innovating and those that are dying. Right? If you're not innovating, you're dying either quickly or slowly, but you are dying.
Yeah.
So the good news is most good leaders at large organizations realize they need to be innovative, and they're smart enough to realize that innovation is hard in the context of a large organization. There's bureaucracy, there's cultural impediments, there's incentives that are problems. Um, and they try and solve this. And there's what I like to call the three-legged stool of what you need to be innovative, right? Just like a stool needs three legs to stand up, you need all three of the following pillars. Otherwise, your innovation program falls down. Number one, you need the right people. Not all people are creative and motivated to do cool stuff.
Mm.
Find the right people that are innovative. Number two, you need the right incentive system. So even if you have the greatest, smartest, most innovative, creative people in the world, if you give them perverse incentives or negative incentives to not innovate, they won't, right? If you tell somebody every time you come up with something creative, I'm going to slap you, guess what? They're going to stop innovating.
Mm.
And then the third is the tools and technologies, right? In the same way that you could have a world-class athlete, but if you don't give him or her a pair of sneakers and a coach and a gym to work at, they're not going to become an Olympic athlete. In the same way, a good innovation program also draws on the right tools and technologies to innovate. And the exact right tools and technologies obviously vary on the context. You don't give a boxer skis, you give him boxing gloves.
Mm. Yes, that's love the sporting analogies. The the idea of the right people is a fascinating one because particularly with existing businesses, there are businesses that have been established for many, many years and they run pretty much on autopilot, although there are people required to run them. But it's not that every day they have to make a new decision. They're basically repeating and turning the wheel over of that particular business. And there are people that are suited to that, and people who are more on the innovative side would probably feel frustrated in those type of roles. Uh, so, how do you, as an organization, what's your view on balancing that need for people that feel fulfilled and comfortable in those kind of roles where they're just churning over the day-to-day operations and it's the same all the time, but it's delivering the base results of that company, and that completely satisfy them, versus those that are more innovative and fitting into somewhere on that innovation culture
So you're
spectrum.
absolutely right. There are some people who are more innovative and some people who are more satisfied by doing quotidian things. The good news is there's a role for both types of people within a well-run organization, right? Any well-run organization both needs to meet their needs and demands today as well as think about the future. What well-run companies do to tackle this problem of some people who just want to do quotidian things and other people who want to be much more creative is they actually make those separate roles, right? You may have an operations team that is worried about doing what they are today, and then an innovation team that is thinking about how do we improve innovation, or sorry, how do we improve operations? How do we create a new product? In fact, that's what really well-run team organizations do. So, borrowing from the pharma industry, right? The people who are manufacturing are line manufacturers of some pharmaceutical drug are very different than the R&D teams, and they're entirely separate. Now they collaborate, but they in the R&D team are scientists who are thinking about doing creative things, not the lab technicians who are making sure that
Mm.
the chemicals are hyper pure that support the research team. And that this is not just true in pharmaceutical and heavy R&D industries. Well-run companies nowadays, manufacturing and fast food, in government organizations, nonprofits, are increasingly having chief innovation officers. So a C-level officer who has an innovation title, and his or her purview is to build a set of people who are innately hungry and creative and want to make change because they don't necessarily fit in the right part, the traditional quotidian parts of the organization, but they are nonetheless valuable from an organizational perspective because the organization, or at least well run organizations, know that they need to become more innovative and they need to continue to innovate every day.
Mm. Yeah, I particularly like that you said having an executive at the C suite level who's responsible for that innovation team. And I think that's where from my corporate experience, a lot of this broke down because it didn't go all the way up. There'd be these skunk works type projects that happened. I think that was the term that was bandied about at the time. That would happen, but it would be sort of a hobby project of those people, and their main task was still something else, and it wasn't necessarily an innovation project. And also, what they were measured against or what they were evaluated against by their superiors, and what they then subsequently were rewarded for, was delivering on that main project. And so the other thing was just a distraction, and as a result, it wasn't actually rewarded. It was often penalized.
Penalized,
So I think,
right? Because you're
yeah,
spending time away from, and this goes back to that
exactly,
same
yeah,
leg, right? Incentives. If you are, I use the extreme example of slapping somebody, but hey, if you're paying somebody to do A and every time they do B, which is more creative, takes away from A, they're going to stop doing B because they're not stupid, right? They realize this
mm,
is going to get them fired, even if it's good for the organization.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I like that idea of sort of having that executive champion that kind of oversees that whole role, and then allowing a team that perhaps their sole responsibility is in the innovation space, so that it's not seen as a distraction. It's seen as their main target, and their goals and their assessments can be based on goals and outcomes that are from that innovation project.
Mm.
Hmm. So I mean, you described the software that IdeaScale do. How does software play into this cultural part? I mean, it's one of the three legs of the stool, right? The tools.
Sure. So obviously, there's many different types of innovation software. I'll speak to just ours for a moment. Um, so if you think about innovation, innovation is often misconstrued as a random genius coming up with a great idea,
Mm,
whether that be for process or a new technology or product. That is pretty rare. Like that Newton moment of an apple falling your head and one genius revolutionizing the world or coming up with, that's actually really rare. Most innovation is collaborative. And if you believe that, which I certainly do, that almost all innovation that happens in the world is a team effort of, scientists, designers, somebody who had a random idea but doesn't know how to do it, like people from all walks of life in different departments coming up jointly with an idea and iterating on an idea, then wouldn't it be great if you had software that enables that at scale? Because it's really hard to have that cross-functional collaboration occurring in a typical organization where you have a finance department that may sit on totally separate floors, the product team, then the R&D team, or they may sit in different countries, right? That's why all these
mm,
tools like email or Slack or Teams have arisen because people inherently understand and understand the value of and the desire to collaborate. So what our software does, it takes that to ideas. It says, okay, let's imagine we have a social network where instead of people submitting funny cat videos or dance videos, they
mm,
put in their ideas for snacks in the kitchen, new company mascots, new products, new material sciences. Our idea scale has been used for super technical to super cool to super, HRE topics. Um, and imagine everybody puts in their ideas in one place. Now, everyone around the company, this could be your employees, your customers, can all see all the cool stuff people are thinking about and iterate on them. They can say, hey, Jurgen, I think you have a good idea, but if you made the color blue to this truck, it'll actually be a much better toy. Or, hey, Nick, you've invented this carbon 14 tube. If you actually dope it with boron, it's going to be much cooler. Or, hey, Adam, wouldn't it be nice if you had Lay's chips rather than Cheetos in the kitchen? And the cool thing is when people are iterating on each other's ideas and voting on each other's ideas, you end up with two things happening. Number one, you end up with more collaboration and a greater diversity of ideas. And number two, the best ideas rise to the top. Think of it like a sieve, where the more people are collaborating, the more you're tapping into that collective intelligence of within people's brains, and the best ideas rise to the top. And that solves a fundamental problem, two fundamental problems that large organizations have. Number one, it's really hard for them to figure out which ideas are good and bad. And number two, it's very hard for the good ideas to get in front of the executives because there's not a nice channel for the janitor sitting in your Milwaukee warehouse to talk to the
mm.
CEO sitting in Switzerland. right? Now, wouldn't it be great if you just got rid of the levels and the best ideas naturally float to the top? And that's what our software does. It helps you collect all of those ideas and helps the best ideas float to the top. So they are right away visible to the executive team or the people who make decisions and make stuff happen.
Mm, yeah, and I love too that it kind of gamifies the process a little bit, if that's the right word,
It is, yeah.
because yeah, because typically what organizations will do is let's have a brainstorming session. Let's all get in the same room and here's the problem and let's brainstorm how we might solve that or how we might come up with a new product to address this market need. And so I'll put my hand up and I'll say, well, what about if we did this? And then immediately I'll get back, oh, that's a stupid idea. That'll never work. And then the next person puts up their hand and says, "What about this?" And then immediately again, "Oh, that's a stupid idea. That'll never work, and it didn't work last time. What do you think? What makes you think it'll work this time?" So the further time goes on, of course, the less likely people are to put up their hands and contribute ideas.
The good news about like a software approach versus a dynamic, well, there's two things. Number one, you can only do that live brainstorming session if your guys are all in the same place or
Yep.
all in the Zoom session and all speak the same language and all actually have a similar level of seniority because you're not going to put your hand up and tell your boss's boss that his or her idea is
Yeah.
stupid, right?
Yep.
That's very few companies achieve that level of transparency where it's okay to call your boss's idea stupid. Um, uh, Oh, the cool thing, yeah, but software solves that problem because it removes the need for people to be in the same place or in the same hierarchy or the same language. But it also results in a really cool dynamic where people are more likely to give positive feedback rather than negative feedback. If I don't like your idea, Jurgen, chances are on a software platform, I'm just not going to comment on it. I have better things to
Mm,
do rather than say tell you. I have better things to do than
exactly.
tell you you're an idiot or your idea is stupid. In fact, what I'm
Yeah.
going to do is if I see 20 ideas and I dislike yours, I'm actually going to participate in the stuff that I care about. It's analogous to, if you think about Reddit communities, I don't know if you're a participant on Reddit. There's a million different communities. People don't go on communities that they're not interested in just to say bad things about that community or that topic. Instead, they go on the topics which they're passionate about or interested in. And our software does that again for ideas, where instead of telling Jurgen that your idea is bad, I go to your good idea and say, "Hey, Jurgen, you actually had this good idea. Here's few ways to make it better." So you get a much more positive feeling and positive set
Yeah.
of contributions that are
Yeah.
constructive rather than destructive.
It reminds me a little bit of, and I'm trying to think of the name of the guy that first wrote about this. It's called Open Space Well, I think it's Open Space Technology, and it's a meeting process whereby, first of all, everybody gathers around in a circle, and the topics kind of elaborated and the objectives of the meeting, and then people use post-it notes to write down ideas or issues that need to be addressed. And that happens for a certain space of time, and then the post-it notes are placed around the wall of the room, and the person who suggested it goes up and owns it, and then people can go up and vote on them. And then there's the open space part is there's little mini meetings take place around that particular post-it notes, and there's only a couple of rules. I think the one of the rules might be around that you can't be negative. You can only kind of contribute positively to it. And the other rule is the rule of 2 feet. So if you can no longer contribute to a conversation around one particular Post-it note or one idea or issue that's there, then you just walk away and go to the next one. So it's like you're not stuck in this meeting where, "I've had enough of this," or "I'm not interested anymore." You just walk away, go to the next one. So it's the social media aspect of what you're describing is a little reminded me a little of that.
I need to look this up because that's conceptually what our software does. I was not aware there was a physical analog to it or a physical set of rules or process, but I'm going to go look this up because I do want to, learn from this guy's research.
Yeah, okay. Well, when we're done recording, remind me because the book's in my bookcase over there. I'll just have to find it there and tell you the name of the author. But it's Open Space technology, and for the listeners, we'll link that one in the show notes. So I'll find out exactly the author's name. Harrison's um, comes to mind, but yeah, that's all I can think of at the moment. Anyway, moving on. One of the things that certainly I think this opens up, the way you've set this up, is integrating AI into this in terms of, I mean, I imagine in terms of feeding or ranking the feed in terms of popularity, in terms of how many likes a particular idea is getting or how much interaction is happening, that sort of is one aspect of it. But talk to us a little bit more about how you see AI fitting into all of this, and knowing that you're a kind of a champion of
Sure.
AI.
Sure. AI is fit into IdeaScale in four ways. Number one, setting aside internally, we use it a lot to just be more efficient at our jobs, whether that be sales, whether that be marketing, whether it be our software engineers. That's one way. But the other three I'm going to talk about is how AI fits into the software and helps it helps our customers innovate. First is the very first way we implemented AI into our technology was to help people write better, because it turns out that a lot of people basically have stage fright. They think they have an idea, but they don't think they can write about that idea well and communicate it effectively. So they just don't. And that, it's stage fright is a common phenomenon in real life speaking, but turns out a lot of people have stage fright in writing too, because they know that they're not going to sound as eloquent as some of their peers. So we use AI to help people just write better. That if they put in their idea, and the AI will just help them present it and communicate it more effectively. That's all been in our software for a while now, and it's pretty cool. Very simple use case, solves a very simple but important problem. Gets rid of stage fright or reduces stage fright significantly. The two other methods where AI is coming in have not yet been released, but they're being released in a few months. Number one is our AI analytics engine. And so analytics is a really interesting space, because if you're dealing with numerical data, it's really easy to do analysis, right? It's easy to add two numbers, multiply two numbers, figure
Mm,
out ratios and divide. How do you do that with a qualitative data point like an idea,
yeah.
right? So that historically has been pretty much impossible, because people will say, "I like this idea," but that's a feeling. That's not something you can necessarily analyze and stick on graphs. And graphs and charts and summary data forms are very important for executives leading complex organizations. So this tool that's coming out in a few months for us, I think around January, our AI analytics engine will take all of your qualitative idea data and analyze it. So with one click of a button, it'll ingest all of the data that it was in your organization's idea platform, and then output a couple of very, very simple graphs that tell you what the themes are, what the best ideas are, what the most implementable ideas are, what are some common themes that people are excited about versus hate. So it'll summarize this data very, very effectively, as well as point out the ideas that are most likely to be most impactful for your organization's mission, which is very, very cool. That's number one. Number two is what we call our idea copilot. Right now, within our software and within most companies' innovation processes, innovation is still being human led, which is good. But turns out, wouldn't it be more powerful if you had an AI copilot? In the same way, not most software engineers nowadays are using a coding copilot, most
Mm.
marketers are using a marketing copilot. Wouldn't it be great if you had an innovation copilot? And that's exactly what we're putting out in a few months, which is basically a brainstorming partner where you can go back and forth with an AI to jointly come up with cool ideas. And sometimes the AI can pick other ideas, combine them together in a really cool permutation and put up with its own ideas. So all of a sudden you have not only human beings collaborating with AI to come up with new innovation, new ideas, but also AI able to ingest your data, put in its own new creative ideas. And that requires AI to be creative, which we've been trying to be very thoughtful about and engineer in a really interesting way.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds fascinating. As you were describing that, I was thinking, well, one of the ways that I find AI very powerful is having conversations with it. And I imagine that if on the IdeaScale platform you have an idea and a long conversation that is a bunch of people adding to that idea or critiquing that idea or um, trying to turn it around and saying it'd be better if you did Y instead of X. That if you took that whole conversation, fed it into one of the AIs, one of the large language models, and said, well, you know, give me, consolidate all of this for me and give me a critique or something, and then had a conversation based on all of that input with the AI, that it could prove very powerful,
Well,
could prove
that's
useful.
exactly what our AI analytics engine basically does. It ingests all of that
Okay.
data, the conversations, both within an idea, like the conversation about this idea, but also the conversation about 1,000 other ideas,
That's
and
mm,
kind of spits out its own interpretation. And then the idea copilot will go a step further. It won't just analyze what you've had, but it'll help create new stuff, which is even
mm,
more cool.
yeah. How do you and maybe this is getting into the nitty-gritty, so just
Please go
sort
ahead.
of
I'm glad
if
to try and
yeah,
answer.
if you say that, but how do you prevent confirmation bias in that sense? Because that's something that I'm always conscious of. If I'm asking a lot of questions of the AI and I've been feeding it a whole lot of stuff, um, that I I often ask it, give me an opposite view or critique all this for me, because of the idea of confirmation bias. I mean, the more information I feed it, the more it's going to be focused on what I've got up here, and everything that it returns back is more or less going to be just a reflection of what's up here. Whereas I'd like the AI to take me outside of that and give me more.
Yeah, so there's actually two really easy solves from a technical point on how to do this. Number one is what's called the context window. If you've been feeding the AI a lot of information, it remembers that more recently than all the stuff it's been trained on the internet, and therefore its context window is really focused on what you gave it. You can force an AI to open up its context window or forget parts of its context window. So you can tell an AI, "Hey, forget the last 10 things you're going to set to it." That's method number one, just opening up the context window. Number two is what's called hyper prompting. Hyper prompting is giving think of it like the 10 commandments. You're giving the AI certain rules it cannot break. So, one rule you can give it is, hey, don't overweight Jurgen's opinions or thinking relative to what you already learned from the internet or during your training period. So, you can tell it no matter what, you're not allowed to like Jurgen's ideas more than anybody else's.
Yeah.
You have to be impartial. The
And
way
I
you
won't, and my feelings won't be hurt if you do that.
Well, you do this secretly in the background, but that's actually
Yeah.
something good prompt engineers or good AI tuners do, is they
Mm.
design these hyper prompts, which are kind of inviolable commandments or rules that the AI is not allowed to break. I don't know if you are a fan of robotics, but there's Asimov's three laws, right? That a robot will harm no human. What is it? Yeah, basically, the Asimov had these three laws. The robots shouldn't harm humans. They should help humans, and to the extent they don't violate rules one and two, they should avoid being destroyed. Um, uh, it's so good AI engines
Mm.
nowadays have kind of these hyper prompts, and hyper prompts could be ethical. They could say, "Hey, don't promote hate or violence or misogyny or racism," but they can also be intellectual ones where they say, "Look, do try and avoid being biased, or try and be much more analytical, or be more evidence based, or be more feelings based." And these are all totally acceptable, different variations of hyper prompt tuning. I keep saying hyperparameter. That's something else for AI. Hyper
Yeah,
prompt
okay.
tuning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty, but there's certainly a couple of really great tips there that I certainly wasn't doing and may start to
Yeah,
incorporate
you
into
can
the
do it
work
right
that
at
I'm doing with it.
the way you do hyper prompt
Yeah.
is right at the beginning of your chat with Chat GPT or whatever. Tell it the three or four rules that you
Mm.
never want it to break, and ask it once in a while to repeat back those rules. Otherwise, it sometimes forgets.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I've had some really interesting conversations where I've just been blown away by the capability. But I'm always sort of in the back of my mind cautious of some of those things. I mean, the easy bit, and I often do this, is fact check it. Ask it to fact check. So if it's given me some facts, or one of the things I often ask it from the transcript of these podcasts is, I say, give me a quote from the guest that I can use. And what it tends to do is, um, what's the right word? It doesn't give a direct quote. It kind of gives its own interpretation of it, and it always sounds good. But what I'm looking for is actually a direct quote because I want to match it up in an audiogram with the audio portion of that quote. So I need the written bit. So I'm finding myself there, always going back and checking when it comes back with something. I say, is that a direct quote of what the guest said? Is that
Well,
word
that
for
could be
word
one
what
of
the
your
guest
hyper
said? Yeah.
prompt. That could be a
Mm,
hyper prompt, only pick direct quotes.
yeah. Yeah. Excellent. All right. So how do you see the future for innovation and for IdeaScale and the work you're doing, particularly with what's happening in AI and what else is coming down the track?
Sure. I think that there's a few kind of mega themes that are affecting both our industry and how we, adapt to the industry at IdeaScale. Number one, more and more large organizations are realizing innovation needs to be an explicit part of their value system, their value statement, and their corporate strategy. Too many, the term chief innovation officer didn't exist 15 years ago, and that term is increasingly proliferated because organizations realize the word innovation or R&D has to be a core part of their mission statement. In addition, that's not just a buzzword. You actually need someone to go do it. In the same way, you can't just put marketing on your mission statement and it happens. You need to have a chief marketing officer, chief revenue officer, right? Someone who's going to actually deliver that object. So that's number one. There's been a greater appreciation that innovation is real, it's necessary, and you need someone to do it. Um, Number two is organizations have become more and more sophisticated at how they demand innovation to happen, right? 10 years ago, you hired a chief innovation officer, you gave him or her like a couple of employees and said, go at it not a lot of structure. Over the last 10 years, given kind of the experience of organizations as well as best practice and research that's come out, people have realized there's a right way to do it, there's a wrong way to do it. And so there are best practices now that are well established. There's a right way to do it. And if you're not following that, you're probably just shooting yourself in the foot because you're going to have to reinvent the wheel. So that's why technology, whether it be the best processes or the technology support systems that exist, these have evolved to now be much more sophisticated than they were, let's say, 5 years ago or 15 years ago. And more companies are relying on both the kind of process best practices as well as the technology best practices. Now, where AI fits into all of this is kind of two levels. Number one, throughout the industry, and this is not just unique to us, but to almost all industries, AI has dramatically increased the efficiency of information workers, whether you are a translator, whether you are a financial analyst, whether you are an investment banker. AI has just made things much, much more efficient for everyone. That raises the bar for quality expectations. Secondly, in our industry, innovation is people there's kind of a philosophical shift that's going from innovation being truly like the domain or specialty of human beings to people realizing, hey, AI can help us innovate, or and sometimes AI can innovate itself. Um, and self-teaching machines or machine solving AI, which is called agentic AI, is increasingly becoming important because you realize that AI can not only do things faster than you, sometimes it can come up with new ways of doing things that a human being may never have come up with because that's just not the way our alligator brains are
Mm,
wired, our reptilian brains, sorry. So that's the other thing that's happening, that AI is really moving towards a co-pilot role or sometimes an agentic role within the innovation world. And obviously our technology continues to evolve with that need.
yeah, pretty exciting stuff there. Mm. All right. Well, is there something like as a champion of the generative AI, is there something that keeps you up at night worrying about it?
So yes, I'm deeply worried about two things of generative AI. Number one is, okay, it is going to result in tremendous disruption to the workforce. And especially as this technology keeps advancing, where does that leave human beings to be? Like, are some people just going to be totally replaced by AI and can't find work out anywhere? And that's a really big social problem. I think it's going to happen, candidly. I don't know whether it's going to happen in 5 years or 50 years, but it's going to happen where AI replaces something that's been very special about human beings, our ability to think. um, and what do we as a society do when we've taken away jobs from people who are now unemployed because AI can do everything they could and can do it for
Mm,
one millionth the cost? That's problem number one. That's kind of a long term problem that keeps me up. Problem number two, which is a much shorter problem, is kind of on the workforce. You now have increasing groups of people who've adapted to this technology and those who refuse to or are unable to adapt to these technologies to become more efficient. And what that means is some people are literally 100 times more efficient at their jobs than somebody who hasn't adopted this technology. And that means you have to basically make labor force changes because if I have two employees, both are doing kind of the same job, but one person is doing it 100 times better because he or she has adopted to a better technology, that means person A, who did not adopt this technology or learn the skills, is less relevant, is going to be replaced. And that's a really difficult kind of human change that you have to think about, right?
Mm.
As a leader, as an executive, that look, you never want to let somebody go, but at the same time, you have to acknowledge that if some people are more skilled, they are going to create more value for your customers and for your other employees. And that's important in a competitive capitalistic marketplace.
Yeah, it's a fascinating scenario, isn't it? Because I guess it's always been the case that those people that have invested in themselves and improved their skill set and as a result become more productive in the workplace have advanced quicker and have had greater job security than those that didn't. But now with the advent of AI, that's just been magnified like
Oh,
a
exactly.
hundred
Yeah.
or
Previously,
a
you get an
thousandfold.
extra, previously you get a college degree, maybe you're 20% smarter or 20% more
Yeah,
effective
yeah.
than the person next to you. But that's 20% is kind of a rounding error in the grand scheme of things. But today it's that difference is perhaps 10x or 100x. And that's
Mm,
noticeable without doing any fancy math. Right.
yeah, that's right. And with the longer term one, it's an interesting question. I think as long yeah, the big thing is, again, it's probably gonna be magnified, so it may happen really quickly because of the way the generative AI has kind of come on the scene and with this thousand magnification of the difference between people who adopt it in terms of their productivity and those that don't, it may be really fast. But if it's not, if it's an evolution like other evolutions have been in the past, then I think what'll just happen is that certain jobs will disappear and they just won't be there and people will train for other jobs.
I'm a
But of
little,
course, if
yeah.
it's a real quick transition, then all of a sudden you've got people trained for jobs that don't exist any longer.
Let me push back on that a little bit because I agree with your dimension about speeds. The speed of technology certainly matters in terms of how much disruption happens. But I think generative AI is a fundamentally different technology in terms of the quality of what it is, because it's now impinging upon or infringing upon something that's historically been the special domain of human beings. Like what separates us from the machines, from the animals? Like, and a human being can push a cart, an ox can push a cart, a tractor can pull a cart, right? We've always competed against technology or animals throughout the course of our history, but we've always been special because we can think, we can make decisions. That's the
Mm,
only thing that really separates us from kind of machines and animals. And now we're quickly arriving at a point where there's thinking machines. And if that goes away, right, the one thing that's made human beings special throughout all of our history, that's a little bit frightening because then what place do we have in our society, not just in our workforce, but in our society? When we stop being special and start being like little chips that can think better, faster, and more creatively than I can. That's a terrifying proposition, at least to me.
mm.
And I think it's coming at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah. It's a fascinating topic for discussion. And um, again, I guess I see it in a positive light, and I because I come back to the whole basis of the generative AI is input that's come from people. So without that input, it doesn't actually exist. And I often say this to people who say, well, that's false because it's from AI. And I say, well, yeah, AI gets stuff wrong today, uh, but it's not necessarily false because it's just the collective wisdom of everything that people have put somewhere on the internet. And yes, there's a lot of falsehoods there, but it's still that collective wisdom. And so I wonder if we treat it like that, and that still leaves us ahead of the game as humans.
I would say it's more like a child. You're right that it's been trained on, everything on the internet, right? But
Mm.
just like a child, at some point you teach a child from books that have been written by other people, right? But at some point, and that may be age 12, that may be age 25, the child becomes creative and starts coming up with new
Yeah,
things
yeah.
that are not just regurgitation of what he or she learns throughout their schooling. And AI is on that journey. Already it's showing that it can create permutations of things that a human being would not have done. It is creative by some definitions. Now, creativity is a kind of abstract concept, at least so far. But we are discovering that these tools are getting smarter, and just like a child, at some point, it is quite possible that they surpass their teachers, which
Yeah,
would be
yeah.
us.
Yep, that's right. It's, okay, the teenager's getting rebellious now.
Well, if it gets rebellious, we're in trouble because
Yeah,
this
yeah.
future has infinite memory, infinite resources, infinite compute power,
Yeah,
and perhaps the nuclear launch codes.
yeah, that's right. Yes, that's scary when you think of it in those terms. All right. Well, it's a fascinating conversation, I'm sure, with the ethical considerations and speculating about the future and where that might be headed. We could go on for ages, but I'm just aware of the time. I think it's
Yeah,
a point now to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round. It's the same 5 questions that I ask of every guest, and the idea is you'll give us an answer that'll inspire our listener to go and do something awesome as a result today.
cool. Let's do it.
All right. First question is right in your right up your alley. So, what's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Get the best innovation tool you can, whether it be IdeaScale or someone else. I suggest us just because we're totally free for small teams.
Excellent. All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I spend about 10 to 40 hours every single month taking new courses and new stuff that I've never learned about, including history, literature, algorithms, data science, you name it. Learning every day makes you smarter and makes you more creative.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that. And I I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm always looking at different things and also cross fertilizing stuff. Right? You mentioned a couple of things there that are kind of well outside um, your field that you work in, and yet there's probably lessons you're bringing in all the time. All right. Favorite resource you use most often, apart from IdeaScale?
Favorite resource, either Wikipedia or Coursera.
Mhm.
Coursera is like an online free university where they
Yeah,
just have
yeah.
tons of world class courses.
Yep. Yeah. All right. And is that where you're doing some of, for example, the history
Exactly.
reading?
Or they not the history one, but my data science, my computer algorithms, my music theory courses are all being done on Coursera.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So you're
By the way,
really
just as a,
going broad.
they don't sponsor me at all, but I love them because I can take all of the courses, not pay a single dollar unless I want the certificate. And I don't care about the certificate. I care about the
Yeah.
knowledge, which is such a cool,
Yeah.
like thing that can happen
So,
nowadays. You can just learn for free.
yeah. It's a great model, isn't it? At least for the user, it's a great model.
Yeah.
Not. I hope it's good model for them because I'd like to see them stay around. All right. What's the best way to keep a client on track? Or maybe an innovation idea.
To keep a client on track, did you say?
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's say it's an innovation idea that,
The best way to keep an innovation idea on track is make sure that it is written in an engaging way. Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. If the greatest idea in the world is presented on a stinking piece of meat, it's no one's going to love it. So make sure ideas are presented well, whether that be a beautiful PowerPoint, whether that be worded funnily in a fun way, whether that be emojis. Make sure ideas are presented in a beautiful way, and then they catch fire.
yeah, yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. Not only do they catch fire, people can remember them easily, and if they remember them easily, it means they can talk about them easily with their peers or with their friends or family, and so it that's part of the catching fire, right? Hmm. All right, and finally, what's the number one thing anyone needs to do to differentiate themselves?
I think outworking, just working harder than everybody else. I think that's underappreciated. People think of people's brilliance or their creativity or their artisticness or their athleticness. But really what shines through in the world is like how hard someone is willing to work because that's measurable, it's noticeable, it's palpable.
Yeah, and part of that, it comes back to some of the other things you've been saying throughout the conversation is how do I learn more? How do I become more knowledgeable in different areas? How do I bring in ideas that or tools or knowledge that makes me a lot more productive?
Mhm.
Great. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz round. Now, this has been a wonderful conversation, Nick. Now, where can people find out more about IdeaScale, more about you and the work you're doing, and also maybe even get in touch and say thanks for what you've shared today?
Sure. So for the company, our website is ideascale.com, spelled like right above that, my shoulder there. And again, just a quick plug for our software is completely free for teams of less than 100 people. So whether you're a one person organization or a team within a giant organization, come use our software completely free. Would love if you did. Takes less than 2 minutes to set up, entirely online, no downloads required. Your data is 100% yours. Um, if you want to get in touch with me personally, the best way is through LinkedIn. My name is Nick Jain. I'm usually the first search result for that name anywhere in the world. And I respond to 100% of messages. So feel free to contact me.
Excellent. All right. And we'll include those links in the show notes to make it easy for people to click straight through as well. So you did give us a bit of a call to action there. What action would you like the listener to take out of our conversation today, Nick?
Yeah, the call of action is come check out a free trial of IdeaScale. It is literally the best in class software that exists for idea management in the world. That's why we've been around for 15 years and have hundreds of major companies using our software because we are the best at what we do.
Mm. Excellent. All right. And certainly, well, there's a free demo, and certainly for small teams, it's free for beyond the demo. Is
Yeah,
that right? Have I got that right?
exactly. Yeah, free perpetually for small teams. You can be at a big
Yep.
company and use it for free too if you're a part of a small team within that big company.
Oh wow. Oh, it's very generous there. There we go. So obviously there's a lot of value there that allows you to have those free demos and people get excited and then sign up and subscribe.
Mhm.
All right.
No,
Well, thanks a lot, Nick. Thanks
thank you,
for the
Yuri.
conversation today. It's been a fascinating conversation touching on a whole range of different things and really digging deep into some of the ethical and future implications of AI, as well as talking about innovation in a broader sense in your tool at IdeaScale. So thanks for sharing all that with us today. All the best for the future, and please do stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Yuri. It was wonderful to be on your show today.